Okay, well, welcome everyone to the meeting. The first item on the agenda tonight is a discussion of a third-party collection agency. Our treasurer, Maria Walls. Maria, welcome, and soon you will lead us through this.
I will. Thank you so much for having me here this afternoon. And since it's my first opportunity to speak before you, since you may have been taking your oaths again or newly taking your oath, so congratulations and thank you for having me. An extensive amount of research and preparation has done before I've come before you today, and I'd just like to, we all introduced ourselves, but Kimberly Chesney is the tax collector in my office, and today we do have Amy Wyatt from American Financial Credit Services. She's the Director of Recovery Services, as well as Dean Prang, who is the Manager of Client Relations. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about the next delinquent collections method we're hoping to pursue. So, I want to talk through where we were. So prior to 2014, the only delinquent collection method used was an annual tax sale. Effective for real property, but for other property types, not as effective and efficient. In 2014, we began the use of the set-off debt program. And in 2017, we would like to begin the use of a third-party collections agency. In the future, I want you to know that my position as treasurer, my goal is to have 4 to 6 different delinquent collections programs that we're utilizing so that when we have a delinquent account, we can identify the best program that is most effective and efficient for the pursuit and collection of those tax dollars. So adding a new program, this is one step towards that goal. And I wanted to recap set-off debt for you because we do use that. We have discussed it at length in the past, and we have submitted $6.7 million to the set-off debt program and have collected approximately $770,000. It's about 11.3% collection rate. That doesn't sound great, and it's not as high as I would like it to be.
Better than zero.
Oh no, anything's better than zero, but we want to operate at 100% collection is the goal, okay, Brian? So that's, I mean, if I can get every dollar in the door, it makes your all's job easier, as well as the other agencies. So that sounds not great, but here's the problem. It's the only other method we've been using besides tax sales. So every delinquent account almost goes through debt set-off, despite the limitations of the debt set-off program, which are, one, it needs to be an individual, so business, personal property is not eligible. Only an individual that we then receive a Social Security match on that taxpayer. Then that taxpayer, sorry this isn't clicking, there we go. They have to file a South Carolina income tax return that also is receiving a refund. So if all of that happens, you are then possibly still competing with other debtors. So it is effective for certain business, for certain delinquent taxes, but really not what we're here to talk about today. So why we're looking at a third-party collections agency. One size doesn't fit all. One collection method or 2 collection methods is not going to fit the needs of the treasurer's office in our responsibility to collect on your all's behalf. A third-party agency would supplement the resources we have, where every department is going to be limited in time, money, staffing, right? Those 3 things. By using an external agency, we are benefiting from those resources without burdening ourselves with the cost of increasing those 3. It provides individualized solutions to the delinquent taxpayer. I do not have the staffing to call every taxpayer right now. I would love to, that'd be great. But that is a part of our limitation we cannot do. An outside agency can provide that service. We do, our office is at the forefront of whatever technology we can get our hands on, and I expect any entity we're working with to do the same, so that is a requirement in an entity that we work with. A simplified reconciliation process. The money coming back in as a result of these efforts, we need to be able to easily and efficiently account for each of the dollars that comes in. And then to identify uncollectible accounts. In recent past, there have been emails that mention the treasurer's ability to declare accounts uncollectible. If we had pursued delinquent collections on these accounts before, we could potentially declare them uncollectible, but you can't decide that on something you've never pursued before. So why we have selected American Financial Credit Services, they meet every criteria of what I just listed. They specialize in the collection of governmental debt. They have collected, and I was corrected earlier this afternoon. They've collected over $77 million at this time through their governmental debt collection program. And what I felt was most important to me and what I think will matter to you all, the majority of their clients are elected officials. That's not 100% of my priority. However, what it tells you is that their clients are also people that need to serve and collect from their constituency. And that means they can appreciate the level of respect and customer service that we want shown to our constituents. They have an interactive debt management system where we can log in any given moment and see in real time the status of our collections. We can see notes from their phone calls, recordings of those phone calls, letters, correspondence, so that if we're contacted by one of those taxpayers, we can just as easily care and provide them information to that individual as well as they can. 100% of the tax balance due is collected from the delinquent taxpayer at no cost to the county. The cost is burdened, is handled by the taxpayer themselves. It is 20% of the balance due, which is it's not a small proportion. However, there is a similar program that is run by the Department of Revenue, and they are more expensive than American Financial Credit Services. They charge 22% in order to participate in their program. Last but not least, and I think there's one more bullet, they're an informational resource. So in the instance where they make contact with a delinquent taxpayer that no longer has their business, and they just failed to file the appropriate paperwork with the Department of Revenue, they will advise that taxpayer of the correct paperwork and things they need to do to rectify their tax situation free of charge to that taxpayer. That 20% fee is only charged and collected if there is a tax upon which can be collected, if they can collect the funds. If it's just to provide information and they're not ultimately due, then there is no fee for providing that information to the taxpayer. And finally, they can assist in the identification of potentially uncollectible accounts. For instance, if they are attempting to locate a delinquent taxpayer they find or believe is deceased, they will communicate that with our office, and then we can appropriately decide whether we need to declare that tax uncollectible as there is no individual to continue pursuing. Therefore, it stops this cycle over and over of taxes rolling forward, hopefully, rolling forward and then not getting a collection on and yielding results for the county. We surveyed 18 of AFCS's current clients, and they are all treasurer's office, such as ourselves, and 100% of them responded that they have received timely and accurate funding with no issues whatsoever. They received 100% of the time notifications of any issues that may prevent collection from occurring. 56% of those never used an agency before, and 100% said each time they have had a reliable and consistent technology and data with no issues. These are all things that we want to, this is what we want to see from an entity that we're going to be partnering with. So implementation, what would that look like? A letter of notice would be sent to each taxpayer that is currently delinquent at least 30 days prior to submitting the debt to AFCS. In addition to that, we will advertise in the newspaper, similar to the tax sale, the list of accounts that we're pursuing collection upon. And finally, we'll do, through traditional and social media, public outreach as we normally do, to get as much information to the public and notice as possible. Once we pass that, we will submit the debts to AFCS. The first thing they're going to do is each account will be skip traced. Essentially what this is just a fancy way of saying they're going to do what they can to find the individual who's responsible for that business. Once they do, they will contact them by letter and phone, whatever is necessary to reach that individual and communicate the debt. Payment plans are an option if they are unable to pay the debt all at one time. And finally, payments received, this is required by statute, will be applied to the oldest tax year first. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions for you all. And of course, as I mentioned, we have our tax collector here as well as Amy and Dean from AFCS.
Okay, we'll open up for questions. Steve?
Yeah. Question in terms of priority, the debt set-off program is still in place?
Yes.
So
Yes.
that doesn't go away, that is.
Correct.
Is something this is in lieu of that, that program?
Think of it as we're adding to the wheelhouse,
Okay.
because there are accounts that can't go to debt set off that we need alternate ways to pursue those funds.
Second question, they will work business accounts as well, is that correct?
Entirely business accounts, yes.
Good.
Mike?
In the world of collections, when you have, let's call them buckets, 0 to 30, 30, 60, 90, 120, where, at what point in time, in that time frame, does the county turn it over to them for their second notice of collection? What bucket does it fall in?
After a full year's collection cycle has occurred. So once the tax year is completed, then we will evaluate, are they going to debt set off, are they going to the third party collection, are they going to tax sale? It's after a full year's cycle has occurred.
Brian, question?
You have a backlog, obviously, of taxes that have not been paid over the years. What's the oldest year of taxes that you currently would try to collect through this program?
We can go back 10 years. So that's how far back we're gonna go.
Okay, and that's a state statute, right? 10
Correct,
years is the-
it's a statute of limitations on how far back we can go to collect.
Alice? Yeah.
Payment plan, would they be required to pay the 20% on that payment plan too, or was the payment plan?
The
good
20%
enough?
is calculated on the total amount due.
So they, on the payment plan, they'd be paying 20%?
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
Steve?
Within the payment plan, let's say you had somebody that could pay 50%, that's all we thought we could ever get. Is that an option, or does you have to do the 100% 20 over time?
At this time, that's not an option.
By statute, or is that would be our choice?
Well, the statute says the county, the treasurer cannot collect partial payments. So unless we were willing to go down that road, which at this time I'm not,
Okay.
it's not up for
Got
discussion.
it.
We have to accept and collect the full amount that's due.
Okay.
Any other questions? I guess from my perspective of what you sent out, Maria, that I was shocked to see the magnitude. It's about $14.8 million.
Yes.
And that represents what, about 45%, I think you said, of the delinquent accounts?
Correct.
Probably the larger of those.
I mean, it's almost half. It's significant.
Brian?
What about people who want to contest the bill? And this has actually happened to me. I had a boat that I had sold, and I had provided all the data to the Department of Natural Resources, DNR, and I had provided all the information to the Treasurer and Auditor's Office. This was several years ago. But literally for 3 years, I
Well,
was
it's a
getting tax
resolution,
bills
like-
on a boat that I
Yeah.
had sold legally and done all the paperwork and processed it as well as I could. So will there be a process for people to contest this? And
Yes, of course, and which would be the avenue that we would want them to take. It's through the Department
well,
of
actually,
Revenue.
we'd rather have them just pay it.
No, I mean, we want them to do whatever is best for them and accurate. So,
Right.
if they have failed to, let's say, file a correct form with the Department of Revenue and they have a statutory value, they will be instructed on how to correct whatever needs to be corrected through the Department of Revenue. That's the goal here. If they came to the county and it wasn't communicated with the Department of Revenue, that's who these values are coming from. So we need them to go there to prevent it from continuing to happen.
Steve?
One other question, back to what Stu said. There's no way to compromise the debt. In other words, you know, in my years of bank collections when I was an early banker.
Very different.
Yeah, I know. But it would seem like that's only reasonable. I mean, if you know what the assets are of the, and the debt paying repayment capability of the taxpayer would be, it seems only reasonable that you would somehow be able to come to a conclusion that, you know, we're only gonna get half or 60% out of this taxpayer forever. And we
Well-
better have it, we'd be better to have it now than over a payment plan of 5 years or 10 years.
And for a private organization, that makes definitive sense. But at this juncture, we have no idea what the ability to pay is. To put it in context, the year program will go so far as to draft, do wage garnishments. I mean, they want every penny. And to be frank, you have thousands of taxpayers who are paying on time 100% of their bill. So why should we expect one to pay 100% and not the other? Forget the statutory ramifications of not being able to accept partial payments. A payment plan is something that can be negotiated, and once that's entered into, it will operate exactly how we do the set-off debt program. It's held in an escrow account, and then once an account can be paid, the payment is applied, and then the revenue will be recognized, of course, by the agencies.
Ryan, another
You
question?
mentioned wage garnishments. How does that work? It just seems, unless there's a judgment.
A different program. I was mentioning that as
okay.
a reference to Councilman Phillips, that that is something that if you are pursuing every dollar, the asset or the ability to pay of an individual is not really relevant in the context of our conversation. Because, did you want to jump in? Because I kept seeing your hand.
I was just going to add something to what you had said. Not only is there issues about the partial payment, but there's also a statutory requirement that the oldest
Correct.
outstanding bill has to be paid first.
Yes.
Before you can then catch up with the newer years. And
Yes.
so there's a lot of limitations that are on that office about
Correct.
what they have to collect.
Our goal is to get the tax base to be as accurate as possible based on what the taxpayers should actually be paying. And once they have, they feel comfortable what that is, then what can we do to pursue those payments? That's what our goal is.
Stu?
Is there any downside or argument against doing this?
Other than you may get some angry phone calls from people they didn't realize they had a tax from 10 years ago. No.
Yeah, okay. Seems to me we ought to get on with it, whatever we have to do.
I'll make a motion, we accept this gear program for the treasurer's office, something we have to.
Okay,
The
that's-
third-party collection.
Third-party collection.
I'll
Okay.
second it.
All right, we have a motion, second. Well, Stu had asked the question, this does not require an ordinance, it's simply a resolution from county council
Correct.
to
For a resolution.
authorize that we go through the collection agencies. I might add that there's, there's obviously the incentive here to collect money for back due taxes, but there's another advantage of this, and that is you're going to identify companies that are dormant or out of business.
Yes.
And we'll be able to therefore clean up the tax rolls to some extent. And there's a lot behind the scenes on this with respect to DOR, Department of Revenue from the state, and how these things occur in the bills. For dormant companies, I guess DOR continues to issue, and we have to put on the tax rolls an amount of money.
Yeah.
And a lot of behind the scenes things. But the point is, we'll be able to use this to clean up the tax rolls, and that's beneficial to us as far as getting an accurate value for the what the wealth of the county is, or the
Correct. Ultimately, the onus is on the taxpayer. They at one point initiated the creation of a business, and if that business is dissolved, they did not take the steps that they needed to clear up that account with the Department of Revenue. So of course, the Department of Revenue knows no different. To put it in the context of debt set-off, Josh did an amazing job being our hearing officer. For many of these people, they were trying to rectify that boat with DNR for 3 years, and no one could ever finally resolve it until I think he was the first person they probably ever sat down with who could say, this is what you're going to do, this is how you're going to do it, and you're never going to deal with this again. When I was present, not a single person left angry. They were shocked at how pleasant it was and quick, and so this does not need to be a negative thing. A lot of people that may be on this list don't even realize they're on it, didn't know how to properly do it. So it's not just to increase revenues and to have a good mill value, it's also about providing a public resource for business owners and people in our community that just didn't realize that they needed to do that.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, if there are no other questions, we have a motion on the floor to accept the recommendation of Maria with respect to the Treasurer's Office and tax collection using the collection agency she presented. We will now call a vote on it. All those in favor, please so indicate by signifying by raising your hand. And that is Alice, you were voting?
I'm not on
You're
this
not on the committee.
I'm not
It's
on
unanimous of committee members present.
Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you, Maria, for bringing it forward. I think this will be a positive thing for the county to be doing for the residents of the county.